Hi everyone, welcome back to Unorthodox Cricket. Now we're about 72 hours away from the opening test of the Ashes in 2019. Now I'm super pumped for this one. What a time for cricket. We've just finished up a great World Cup. Couldn't really have asked for too much more there. Maybe a New Zealand win, but we won't go into that. But yeah, going off the back of a World Cup into the Ashes, it's pretty good as a cricket fan. So as for me, I think cricket is the purest form of the game, so it is something I've put a heavy focus on and do enjoy watching the most. The World Cup was exciting, but to back that up with the Ashes is absolutely huge. And England going head-to-head with Australia, it's going to be a really hard one to pick. Obviously, England knocked Australia off in the semi-finals, so Australia are going to have a bit to prove. And England coming off the back of not only a World Cup victory, but then a very narrow test win against Ireland, they're going to have a lot to prove. I say narrow against Ireland, they did win quite convincingly in the end, but they know, and all English fan knows and cricketing fan knows, that they didn't put a convincing performance on the board, and there's going to be plenty of questions there for the Australians to ask them in this opening test match. So what we're going to do today, guys, is we're going to take a look at both teams' squads and just have a look at some strengths and weaknesses within them, and maybe make a prediction of the final Ashes score. Now, as we take a look at both the English and the Australian teams, what I've done here is I've named both teams' starting 11 for which I think they'll go into the game. So looking at England first, I think they'll go with Jason Roy, Burns, Denley, Root, Bairstow, Stokes, Ali, Wokes, Broad, Archer and Anderson. And now from this squad, that means that Sam Curran, Joss Buttler and Ollie Stone miss out. Now the Australian team, I think they'll go on with Warner and Bancroft, Khawaja at 3, Smith 4, Head, Marsh, Payne, Cummins, Stark, Hazelwood in line. Now that means that Patterson, Siddle, Harris, Labanashki, however you say his name, Nessa and Wade miss out. Now, personally, they're not the two teams that I'd go on with, but from everything in the media, it looks like these are the two likely teams going into the game. Personally, I'd make quite a few changes. So if we look at the English team and a couple of changes I would make, at the top they've got Jason Roy and Burns. Now, they both did so-so against Ireland. Obviously, Roy dug England out a bit of a hole against Ireland, and Burns, for me, he just looked like he had horrible technique. Obviously, they want to stick with Denley at 3 and Root at 4. Now, I'm not so certain about this. For me, your best batsman has to bat at 3, and on both teams, that's Smith and Root. I think they're being a little bit conservative and protective of themselves. I think they need to get up the order and take the onus on themselves. More time at the wicket, take on that new ball, and just don't expose these other half-assed sort of batsmen. I'm not saying Khawaja's half-assed, but Denley hasn't proved himself at the international level, so get up there, Root, take the ball on, get in, and it allows you to play a big innings and not be left with the tail. Batting at 4, sure, you still get plenty of time, but for me, your best players have to be facing the best bowlers, and for me that both means Smith and Root moving up to 3. Now I know Smith did bat 3 in the warm-up game, however he didn't score runs, and as we saw in the World Cup, he and Australia do like to protect him a bit, so I personally think they will slide him down to 4, but for me that's a weak decision from both England and Australia if they bat their best batsman at 4. So for me, moving Root up to 3 would mean that Joe Denley misses out. I'd bring in Joss Buttler as the specialist wicketkeeper or a specialist batsman. It could go either way. Either way, Joss Buttler and Johnny Bairstow move up the order to the 4-5 position. I think that just makes the batting a lot stronger. And then you've got guys who have done it. Obviously, Joss Buttler and Johnny Bairstow have done it so well at ODI level. So you know that they've got the capabilities there. And it also just adds a little bit more impetus into the order. Joss Buttler is a stroke maker, so he can put the heat back on the Australians. So for me, top of the order, I'd leave Denley out, Root to 3, and then bring in Buttler for that added batting power. But as for the rest of that English lineup, it looks pretty good. There's no real weaknesses in there. Jimmy Anderson, you know exactly what you're going to get. Such a great bowler for so long. And at the age of 36, he just keeps chipping away, and he almost seems to be getting better with age. I think they'll play Jofra Archer. We saw in the World Cup just how much of an impact he can have, so to see him with the new red ball in hand will be very exciting. Stuart Broad proved how good he is still yet against Ireland. Chris Wokes, you know exactly what you get from him, a bit with the bat and quality with the ball. Moeen Ali, obviously their one spinner, he's done it so well for them at test level, and then he has bits of brilliance with the bat as well. Stokes, coming off such a fantastic World Cup. Johnny Bairstow struggled in the test arena lately, but all throughout that order is pretty class. The only concerns I have is Jason Roy and Burns at the top, and if they leave Denley there. But obviously Jason Roy's done it at international level, so there's no question he has the capabilities there. But this 2-3 spot is a real issue for England, and I think a simple fix is moving Root to 3 and bringing in Joss Buttler. Now looking at the Australian team, obviously Warner's making a team every time. As we move down to Bancroft, he's not a guy I'm sold on. I don't like him. He's a cheat. He hasn't really apologised. So I don't know him personally, but yeah, as I've said before, I don't like the guy. I don't like what I've seen in the media from him, and I don't think he's a good cricketer. I don't think he warrants his position in the team. So for me, I would move Khawaja to open the batting and Steve Smith to 3. Now I know Khawaja's coming off the back of an injury, and he's still pending a fitness test. He seems to be ready to go, so he's done it at test level before. So I'd move Khawaja to open, move Smith to 3, and then you can push head up the order. And then what I would do is I would bring in Matthew Wade as a specialist batsman. He's been in such great form for Australia A and his first class team, and he's been piling on the runs for the last season. His position in the team is he definitely deserves it, and it just makes the batting so much stronger. You leave out Bancroft, move Khawaja up. There's not a lot of batting in their reserves. They've got Labuschagne and the other opener option of Harris. But outside of that, there's not a lot of batting strength. So I personally think that the order would look a lot stronger with Khawaja at the top. Your best batsman of Smith at 3, Head 4, Wade 5, and then you move into Mitchell Marsh, Tim Payne, and the rest of the bowlers. And for me, that just strengthens the batting up a lot more experience. Wade's a bit older, he's a bit more composed. Bancroft's coming off the back of his ban. He's going to get an absolute grilling from not only the English bowlers, but the English fans. Whether or not he'll be able to handle that is another thing. So I would just remove that whole situation altogether, bring in Matthew Wade, who's a better batsman than Bancroft, and that just strengthens up that whole Australian lineup a lot more. But as we take a look at the rest of the Australian batting lineup, Travis Head warrants a spot. He's got a good test match career. He's still young in his career, but he's proved that he can do it. Mitchell Marsh, I think he's highly deserved his recall to international cricket. He's put performances on the board for Australia A and his first class team, and I think he's going to be a handy addition to the middle order and also take a few overs with the ball. Tim Payne, I'm not sold on him, but they're obviously set with him as their captain. He's not a strong batsman. He's got an okay record at test level. I think he's averaging about 35. But the big concern for me is over his 10-15 year first class career, he's only scored the 100. So he's not a guy who's going to win you a game with the bat. But he is a good gloveman, and he seems to be a good leader. So Tim Payne holds his spot. Maybe a little bit of pressure from Wade, but they're not going to drop their captain halfway through the Ashes series. Now into the bowling, Pat Cummins, Mitchell Starc, Hazelwood and Lyon. Now that has been the core of their bowling attack for so long now, and they've done it so well. To leave any of them out, I think, would be a mistake. There has been a little bit of talk in the media about leaving out Mitchell Starc and bringing in James Pattinson. Now they've said this because Starc hasn't been in the greatest red ball form since the World Cup, but I just think you've got to back the class of the guy. He's going to come back. He's going to be back bowling to his best. Not to say that Pattinson isn't a great bowler, because he is. He's destroyed New Zealand on a couple of occasions. But I think you've just got to go in with the tried and trusted bowling attack you have been with for so long. Obviously, they've got plenty of bowling stocks in their reserves. Patterson, Siddle, Nessa, but I can't see any of those guys getting a run in this first game, or even potentially throughout the series. These guys would have to perform pretty poorly with the ball for the likes of Nessa, Siddle to get a run. Obviously, they deserve to be in the squad, but I don't think they're pushing that first 11 spot. Now, as we take a look at both these teams' strengths and weaknesses, I think both teams would be highly concerned around the batting. As we take a look at the Australian team, I think guys like Cam Bancroft, you can't really trust him to score runs. There's probably question marks over Mitchell Marsh coming into the squad. Tim Payne hasn't really done it at Test level. So Australia really relying heavily on Warner, Khawaja, Smith, and potentially Head to do the bulk of the scoring there. I think for them, they'd be happy for bonus runs from both Bancroft, Marsh and Payne, but they're not going to be the guys they're relying on. Similar with the English team, Jason Roy's obviously new to the Test level, so he hasn't done it, so that'll be a bonus for him to score. Burns the same, Denley the same. They're really relying on Joe Root to come good. Bairstow has struggled in the last few years at Test level, but they'll be really hoping him and Stokes can hold up that middle order. So, as you can see sort of on each team, the batting is weak. I'm not excited to watch a lot of these guys. I'm excited to watch Jason Roy because he plays his shots. I'm interested to see how Burns goes, but I don't think he's going to be an exciting player. Denley was also a bit boring. But then, yeah, really looking forward to seeing how Root, Bairstow and Stokes go because they are the exciting players. And with the Australians, obviously Warner's always exciting. I just don't want Bancroft to score runs, and I don't think he will. Khawaja's class to watch, but a little bit boring. Steve Smith, fantastic as always, just to see how he manipulates the field and manoeuvres the ball. And then Travis Head. But looking at it as a fan, I don't think there's a lot of excitement through either batting team. Obviously, those key players on each side, but I'd definitely bring in Butler, add a bit of excitement and just a bit of X factor to the English batting lineup. But I think each team is very weak in the batting department and heavily rely on 3 or 4 players. Now, if we look at the bowlers, particularly Australians, that core there of Australians is just absolute class. Lyon, Hazelwood, Stark and Cummins, they've done it for years, and they're really going to be putting the pressure on these very inexperienced top 3 of the English, and then that's going to put huge pressure on Root, Bairstow and Stokes to step up. So that is one thing that the Australians can really exploit is their English top order, and then really put the pressure on Root, Bairstow and Stokes. Looking at the English bowling attack, once again, Jimmy Anderson, he's so good, he'll be hoping the ball swings around. If he can get rid of Cam Bancroft early, get into the likes of Khawaja and Smith, that gives them a bit of a sniff. But that Australian top order doesn't look quite as weak as that English one does. So Anderson and Archer are going to have to start really well, hopefully get rid of Warner early on. But if they don't make early inroads, they're going to be in for a long day in the field. Broad's shown his class for ages now, as has Wokes. And then you've got Moeen Ali and Stokes to add those additional overs. But England are looking very vulnerable at the top. If they can get through that opening spell, it really sets up the rest of the middle order. Australia less fragile at the top, but I think they are a bit more fragile through this middle order here. So there's different areas for each team to exploit. It's just who can strike early and who can strike the big guns when they need to. Now, picking this series is going to be an absolute nightmare. Each team just rely heavily on 2 or 3 players in particular. I think the batting, it's going to come down to which team can stand up with the bat. There's no question in my mind that each team is going to bowl well. It's just going to be how the batsmen deal with that. And for me, looking at those 2 lineups, I don't know, because Smith and Root, it could come down to those 2 really. Yeah, I don't know. It's too hard to call because I don't think Burns is going to win you a game. Neither is Denley, nor is Bancroft. It could be Australia. I'm going to say Australia for the first game, depending on what 11s they go on with. But if they go on with these 11, I'm going to pick Australia for the first game. But to call the series from the first game, pretty impossible. I'm going to say 3-2 England. 3-2 to England, but we'll reevaluate after the first test. But yeah, that's all for today, guys. Let me know in the comments what you guys think of the 11s that I think each team will go in with. Also, the changes that I think I should be made to both 11. And let me know who you guys would go into each team for the first test with, whether or not you're an English or an Australian fan. Let me know your English team, let me know your Australian team, and some strengths and weaknesses. Thanks again for watching, guys. Really appreciate your continued support. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a comment and a like. If you haven't already, a wee subscribe would be nice. But yeah, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you again tomorrow.